dive into some more Eagles and Vikings here as this game is rapidly approaching us, John. And I guess one of the things that you wrote about, I guess we can kind of put to rest, is the status of one Desean Jackson, who you write's essentially been ruled out for the game on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's not official, but Doug talked about what he's going to do this week, and he said it's just rehab. So the new target is Dallas next week, and perhaps that makes a little bit more sense because that's a division game. But if you go back to when this originally happened, they were talking about 2 weeks. And now, if you get to Dallas, that's 4 weeks. And there's no guarantee he's going to be back for the Cowboys. So it's clearly a bigger issue than they let on at the beginning. And it's a big issue from the offense's perspective because they just don't have wideouts that can get down the field consistently without Desean Jackson. It's been a narrative for years, basically since he left. And when he's not on the field, it's still the same.
Yeah, and it seems that they've been using Miles Sanders as kind of, a guy to give them a little bit of an explosion in the offense, but that's not the same thing as having a wide receiver out there.
No, with those wheel routes, and they can be very effective. And I think they're big this week, which I also wrote about on 973ESPN.com, mainly because Minnesota trusts its linebackers to cover backs one-on-one. Don't give them any help. So maybe you can get guys loose on wheel routes, but that's not something you can count on consistently, like a deep threat at outside receiver. That's something you sort of have to scheme up and sort of have to surprise and do it in a number of different ways with route combinations. So that's not something you can hang your hat on from an offensive perspective.
Yeah. And I know, the interesting thing is they do have some guys. Mac Hollins was a guy. Wasn't he, billed as a deep threat in college? J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, maybe not as a deep threat here, but is that just a lack of trust or what? Why aren't they giving a guy an opportunity to maybe stretch the field?
Well, lack of demonstrated performance, number one. I mean, there's no evidence that Mac Hollins is an NFL-level receiver. I think there's hope that J.J. Arcega-Whiteside eventually develops, but he hasn't looked good in the limited opportunities he has, and that's a struggle for a lot of rookies. Sometimes you just need some time to get your feet under you and learn the system and feel more comfortable. So right now it's not, I mean, there's as I always point out, and Nelson Aguilar would be the main guy, and that's the guy they've used. And as Mike Rowe pointed out yesterday, he actually got loose on a couple occasions against the Jets. He can run. He's got the athleticism for it, but we always talk about his inability to track the football consistently. So that's been an issue. But, yeah, I mean, you talk about guys like Mac Hollins. I mean, that's not going to win you football games, putting him out at receiver.
Is this a game for Goddard? I know we talked a little bit about this yesterday and with the Aguilar concerns, and, Mike brings up Mac Hollins, and we talked a little bit earlier about Arcega-Whiteside, but this seems like a game that's 12 personnel, Ertz and Goddard, both on the field majority of the time together. Is that kind of what you expect, at least for the Minnesota matchup?
Yeah, it is. And I think that's what the Eagles are expecting. That's what they're game planning for. I pointed that out. We don't get to see a ton of practice this time of year in regular season mode, but I did catch the red pennies, and they have them every week for the defenders. They're sort of preparing for in the game plan. And it was 22, 41, 54, and 27. And from a Vikings perspective, that's Harrison Smith, Anthony Harris, J-Ron Kearse, who was their big nickel, which indicates 12 personnel, and Eric Kendricks, the linebacker, because, as I said, they're going to try to get Miles Sanders loose on those wheel routes. So that tells you Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders in the passing game. That's what the game plan is this week.
What about the rushing and the ground game? And we've been talking about this a lot. We talked about Jordan Howard yesterday and how Peterson hinted at Howard getting more carries and the leader in the clubhouse for the running backs for the carries moving forward. But Sproles now, he's been not much of a factor, and then he obviously got hurt this past Sunday. How do you expect, that to play out in the backfield? More Corey Clement or just a two-man game there?
Yeah, just a two-man game. In fact, Corey wasn't at practice today, and we'll see. I mean, the injury report will come out probably after the locker room, which just opened. So it'll be interesting. But either way, I mean, he's not involved in that mix at this point. He's been potentially the punt returner without Darren Sproles. So that could be an issue if he's not capable of going. And we'll see what that's about a little bit later. But yeah, it's a sort of a two-man committee, and it's more natural and it makes more sense. And I think it's good for the Eagles and Jordan Howard. It will be the main running back, and Miles Sanders will be the third down back that you try to take advantage of in the passing game, and that's what it should be. And Jordan has kind of proven he's a better runner, and he knows that environment too, playing in Chicago. And he's had some success against that defense. So you add that into the mix, and he'll be the main running back.
John, now, Doug was asked today about what do you need to do to put a complete game offensively, and Doug kind of laughed. He said, thanks for reminding me. I mean, is he acknowledging that this offense has had some issues, and does he know what the root is? It essentially what we're talking about, Desean Jackson not being there? Does that clean everything up, or is there other issues that this offense is having that were unexpected to you?
No, I think a lot of it has to do with Desean. He was more joking about the defenses in this 6-game stretch. They have 3 on the road, 3 at home, and you talk about Minnesota, which is number 4. Typically, they're always in the top 5. Dallas has a good defense. Buffalo has a really good defense. And then you have the home games. Seattle has a really good defense, typically. New England, and I'm forgetting the third team off the top of my head, but they face 6 good defenses in a row, and it's a big uptick in what they face to this point, so it becomes more difficult. And yeah, I mean, I think people don't understand, and I actually saw a tweet before I got on with you guys criticizing the Eagles for not having a backup deep threat.
I saw that same tweet and laughed myself.
Yeah, that's not how this
a backup
works.
Deep threat. They couldn't find a starting deep threat for going back to 2013.
13, exactly. It took them over. It took them 6 years to get a deep threat back. It's the same one they had, and you want a backup deep threat? It doesn't.
You get a deep threat, and you get a deep threat, and you get a deep threat.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm kind of laughing at the Mac Hollins stuff. I mean, people act like this is just easy to replace, again, arguably the second best deep threat ever. I mean, when you lose a player like that, it has a impact on your offense, and it takes a little bit, I think, to weather the storm and get your feet under you. And I think the Eagles have started to do that. They've started to do that by going what should have been, in my opinion, a more obvious direction, and that's more 12 personnel, and that's more Jordan Howard. And that helps you in a couple ways, and you've seen that with success on the field, but you're also, make no mistake about it, you're less explosive. I mean, that's part of the trade. Mm-hmm. You're a better team because Dallas Goedert's better than Mac Hollins, and he's better than J.J. Arcega-Whiteside at this stage of his career. But he's not as an explosive as a big 260-pound tight end. Yeah. So it's kind of a give and take. Same with Jordan Howard. He's more experienced. He's a better runner. He's going to take those 5-6 yard gains, but he's not as explosive as Miles Sanders. So it's a give and take.
Real quick on Desean Jackson. Now, he's not going to play this week, it looks like anyway. Is it a slam dunk, though, that he returns next week. I did read something that said somewhere between 7 and 9 against the Bears could possibly be where, Desean comes back.
Well, the hope behind the scenes is Dallas, and they've earmarked Dallas, and for obvious reasons. That's a really important game, and that's, hey, if you're only going to win one of the next two, you want to win in Dallas more than anything, and that's why they've kind of focused on that. But now that you talk about the original focus, I said, was 2 weeks, so. Now you have to question everything. And the fact that this was the first day Desean got back, they were in the bubble. He was supposed to work out on the side and do some rehab things and conditioning things. He wasn't out there when we were out there, but that's a very short period of time. So we'll see how it goes this week. But everything, is up in the air, although I will say that everybody's been pretty consistent behind the scenes and has said he's close. So whatever close means, I would define close as he better be out there against Dallas.
At what point, John, excuse me if you've already brought this up at some point, but I'm curious your thoughts on when Howie will pick up the phone and try and make a trade. I've heard Emmanuel Sanders, obviously A.J. Green. We've all heard about Diggs. Could that be an option if Desean is not caught up?
Well, I mean, if it goes in a really negative direction and it turns into a full-blown sports hernia and is out for the year, then I could entertain those conversations. If he's back in Dallas, no, they're not looking for that. They don't need that. And some of it, I mean, Diggs talked today. He said he was misunderstood, and the Vikings don't have him on the trading block. Sanders is a good receiver, but he's not a deep threat. And A.J. Green, if he's healthy, would help anyone. But again, a different type of receiver. So talked a lot about Golden Tate versus Robbie Anderson. I mean, the Eagles tried to trade for Robbie Anderson, couldn't get him. He would have been a better fit. So if you're looking for fits, you probably want to pick up the phone and look for Robbie Anderson again rather than any of those guys.
John, interesting comments today on Sidney Jones. It sounded like the coach, I don't want to say is finally showing a little bit of frustration, but as much as he could, he basically said, this guy's he's got to get healthy.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Doug's been good at. The old, sometimes you need a pat on the back, sometimes you need a kick in the butt. Sidney got a kick in the butt today. So, there's no other way to say it. Took off the kid gloves a little bit and said, sometimes you got to push through stuff. This is a difficult sport from a physical standpoint. Everybody's pushing through something generally, and some guys handle it better than others. You look at Jason Kelce last year, that litany of injuries that he played through. Now, offensive linemen tend to be a different breed, but you're never going to feel 100% in this league. And there's some players that think they have to be 100% to get out there, and there's other ones that understand what the job entails, and you got to fight through stuff. And I think Sidney hasn't figured that second part out yet.
What about Orlando Scandrick? I know we've talked about him as well, but could he be around here long-term being the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I mean, well, if he plays like he did against the Jets, so it's a combination. And by the way, he wasn't at practice today, so that's another one to keep an eye on. Maybe it was just a personal thing because he's obviously a veteran and he had to move from Los Angeles, so hopefully it's nothing serious. But we have to check on that as well. I mean, he was lights out against the Jets, but that's the Jets, and that's Luke Falk, and that's no ability to hurt you. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, this is a big game for a number of reasons. It's a big game for the obvious reasons. It's a conference foe. It's a good team. It's on the road. All the normal stuff. but it's also a team that has really good receivers against this banged-up cornerback situation. And Sidney was at practice today. It's pretty clear. Doug told him, get out there and play. So you would think it's going to be Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones to start outside, and Scandrick would be the nickel. So he'll have another opportunity, but it's a much more difficult test. I mean, this is a team that struggles with route runners, and you got 2 of the 10 best route runners in the NFL on the same team. So it's going to be interesting.
Now, John, we got a lot on this game that we're going to dive into the next couple of days, but you've been writing a lot about this game. I know you covered the Vikings as well, and you know that team pretty well. You write that this is the irresistible force. You know, this is a second Gorilla Monsoon reference on this show in less than a week. Casey Joyner gave us the Gorilla Monsoon on Friday's show. The irresistible force, meaning the immovable object. But that's, you know, you got the Vikings who want to run. You got Schwartz's team who really does well in the pass. But the Vikings do have the weapons to throw if they choose to. I mean, Cousins threw for over 4,000 yards last year, and their 2 receivers, I'm sure there'd be 30 teams lining up to say, I'll take those 2.
Yeah, they do, and that's been the struggle in Minnesota, and that's why Mike Zimmer's receiving so much criticism out there, and Kevin Stefanski, who is Ed Stefanski's son, is the offensive coordinator.
It's 2 Ed Stefanski references on today's show.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's some of it has been, and we had our conference call with Zimmer today, and he was he's always surly, but he was really surly at us because we're asking why such a heavy running game. And part of it was, and has been, the style of game. The opener, they got up 28-0, so they ran it a ton, which is understandable. And then they got behind 21-0 against Green Bay, and they threw it a ton. So part of it is a small sample size, and we'll see how it moves forward. But there's no question he's an old-school guy, and he wants to run the football. And that's an issue. That's got to be an issue for one reason, because this is a business, and you have to be realistic. And you just mentioned the receivers, and you paid the quarterback $84 million. So you have an $84 million quarterback, you have a $60 million receiver, a $50 million receiver, and you're running the ball all the time.
That said, you do have a pretty good running back.
Well, the running back is great, but it is the modern NFL. And, you know, the greatness about Dalvin Cook, and we've talked about this a lot, and Doug confirmed it today, that the Eagles were going to draft Dalvin Cook in 2017, and that would have worked out tremendously for this team, because that's exactly the running back, the type of running back they want, because not only is Cook explosive as a runner, he's a great receiver. So you can use him in both phases, and it just seems, from the outside looking in, it seems like Minnesota leaves a lot on in the locker room. The game plans aren't very inventive, and they're not very inventive because that's what the head coach wants. And then you also have to be fair. You have to point out the offensive line stinks. So that makes things more difficult.
Real quick, John, I know you mentioned that you were on the conference call with Zimmer today, and you're around Eagles practice. So how are you reading the tea leaves on this game halfway through the week? What are your senses tell you, your intel on this so far?
Well, that's what I was saying about the pennies and about who the Eagles are preparing for. And that indicates they're going to play 12 without Desean Jackson. They're going to play a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 2 tight ends. And that means J-Ron Curse is going to be on the field, and he's their version of the big nickel. He's a big safety who plays nickel corner. And I had a penny for him and Harrison Smith. And the one thing Zimmer gushed about was Zach Ertz. He said he's just an unbelievable football player. And one thing about Harrison Smith is that he's very, very aggressive. And if you go all the way back to that NFC Championship game, the Eagles got him on a double move. So I think that's sort of, they're trying to delve back into that bucket and understand they're going to have the 2 tight ends and they're going to use double moves. But second part of that is if you want to use double moves, what do you have to do? You got to protect. And it's a very good defensive front in Minnesota, and it's not Lincoln Financial Field. So it's going to be much more difficult in Minneapolis.
All right, John, final question. Where were you when Ben Simmons hit a 3-point shot?
Yeah, I don't remember. Actually, I do remember.
I mean, I don't remember. It's the biggest moment in the history of sports.
Yeah, exactly. I was on my phone laughing at people going absurd over this. I mean, I think the best part of that is that he took it. I don't care if he made it. I don't care if he airballed it. I don't care what. I think the best part is he took it. But, yeah, I agree with Brett Brown. Anybody's excited over that against a Chinese Basketball Association team. Come on.
They had Andrew Nicholson on that team.
What did the Sixers end up winning by? They beat the spread.
Yeah, they won by 58.
By 50.
Yeah. The spread was 50 going into the game. At halftime, it went up to 63. They won by 58.
Yeah, that's – I mean –
why do I know these numbers? I wasn't looking.
And I know people – I said the same thing at the blue and white scrimmage because Ben didn't take any threes, and he looked like he didn't even look for a three. So until he does it against other NBA players, let's temper the enthusiasm.
You're not buying them. All right. John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Plenty more on our website right now if you need more Eagles fixed at JF McMullen. And countdown to kickoff Thursday and Eagles game day and Monday nights with Johnny Mac. Thanks, pal.
All right, thank you, guys.